Have you ever called the one person who was supposed to love you unconditionally and been told you were an inconvenience? Have you ever had to fight for your life completely alone, while your own family was busy celebrating someone else? My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and last week my father called me crying, not emotional, not choked up, actually crying, sobbing, the kind of raw, broken sound you never expect to hear from a man who spent your entire childhood making you feel like nothing you did was ever quite enough. In 31 years, I had never once heard my father cry, not when his own mother passed away, not once. But last week he did, and when he finally caught his breath and told me what he needed, my answer was exactly 4 words. 4 words that I had borrowed directly from him. But to understand why I said what I said, you need to hear the whole story. Because this isn't just about 4 words. This is about 2 years of silence, 38 hospital visits, and one folder on my phone that changed everything. My name is Claire Whitfield, and I'm a senior UX designer at a mid-sized tech agency here in Seattle. I'm the kind of person who shows up early, stays late, and figures things out on her own, because that's all I've ever known how to do. I grew up in Bellevue, about 20 minutes outside the city, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Big white colonial, 4 floors, a lawn so carefully manicured it barely looked real. The kind of house that says everything is fine. Everything is fine. When I was 17 and asked my father about help with college tuition, he didn't hesitate. He looked right past me and said, "Girls don't need expensive degrees. Claire, a state school is more than enough." So I took out $92,000 in student loans and put myself through school without a single dollar from my family. I paid every cent back myself, month by month, while my younger brother Daniel had his full tuition covered without ever being asked to justify it. That was the Whitfield family hierarchy, and I understood it early. I just didn't understand yet how far it would go. By the time I was 29, I had built something real. A 1-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood I loved, with a fern on the windowsill I'd somehow kept alive for 4 years, which felt like a personal achievement. I had a routine that felt like mine: coffee at 6:30 in the morning, gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays, dinner with my best friend Haley on Friday evenings. I had worked my way up from junior designer to senior without anyone handing me anything, and I was proud of that, in the quiet way you're proud of things you had to bleed for. The morning everything changed started like any other. I was deep in a deadline for a major client campaign when my inbox lit up with a subject line I'd been waiting weeks for. A promotion confirmation, senior designer, effective immediately. I remember printing it out and setting it on the corner of my desk. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I had a deadline. I was in the zone. But something made me pick up. It was the receptionist from Dr. Caldwell's office. My biopsy results were in. Could I come in tomorrow morning at 8? I set the phone down slowly and looked at my desk. The promotion letter was still sitting there, warm from the printer. I placed the appointment reminder right beside it. 2 pieces of paper, 2 entirely different worlds. Same morning. The next day, Dr. Caldwell didn't waste time. The room was cold, the way medical offices always are. Fluorescent lights humming above, an air conditioner running somewhere behind the wall, a vase of artificial flowers on the desk that would never wilt, because nothing in that room was allowed to be real. She folded her hands and looked at me directly. Stage 3 lymphoma, Claire. The tumor is aggressive. We need to start treatment immediately. I remember the exact moment the words landed. I remember thinking, that's the wrong sentence. That sentence belongs to someone else. Someone older, someone sicker, someone who isn't sitting here in a blazer she put on for work this morning. I drove home on autopilot. I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes without starting the car. When I finally looked up, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked afraid, in a way I had never allowed myself to be. My first instinct, without thinking, without hesitating, was to call my dad. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear voices in the background, Madison's laugh, the sound of something being moved across a floor. "Claire!" His voice was busy, clipped, already halfway out the door. I took a breath. "Dad, I just got back from the doctor. I have cancer. Stage 3. The line went quiet. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then he spoke. Claire, listen to me. Your mother and I cannot deal with this right now. Do you understand? Daniel is planning his wedding. The wedding is in October. I felt something leave my body. Dad, I just told you I have cancer. You've always been strong, he said, cutting right through me. You'll be fine. And then the line went dead. I sat on a bench in the hospital hallway for 50 minutes. Doctors walked past. Nurses walked past. Families moved through in clusters, holding each other. Not one person stopped. I was just another person in a hallway, having the kind of day that splits your life into before and after, and nobody could tell from the outside. When I finally moved, it wasn't to call someone. It was to open my phone, create a new photo album, and type a name for it. I called it family. Then I saved the call log. 9:14 in the morning, 1 minute and 58 seconds. That was the last time I called my father for 2 years, but I had started keeping records. Because somewhere, in a part of me I hadn't fully listened to yet, I already knew that one day I was going to need every single one of them. To understand why that phone call broke something in me, you need to understand the family I was calling. My father, Robert Whitfield, was a successful architect based in Bellevue, the kind of man who commanded a room without raising his voice, whose silence was somehow more intimidating than anything he could have said out loud. He built beautiful things for other people and ran his household like a firm, structured, hierarchical, and completely clear about who mattered most. That person was my brother Daniel. Daniel was 2 years younger than me, and from the time we were kids, the difference in how we were treated was never subtle. When Daniel got into the University of Washington, my father wrote the check without blinking. Full tuition, no questions, no conditions. When I was 17 and sat across from my dad at the kitchen table asking about help with college, he looked past me, not at me, past me, and said, "Girls don't need expensive degrees, Claire. A state school is more than enough." I took out $92,000 in student loans and never asked him again. When Daniel landed a position at a prominent Seattle law firm, my father threw a celebration dinner for 50 people, complete with a 4-tier cake and a toast that went on for 10 minutes. When I earned my promotion to senior designer, after 5 years of grinding my way up from the bottom, my mother sent me a single thumbs-up emoji. No words. Just that. I screenshot it. Not for any particular reason at the time, just because something about it felt like it needed to be remembered. Daniel's fiancée, Madison, was everything my family loved. Polished, warm, effortlessly put together. Their October wedding had become the gravitational center of the entire Whitfield universe. Every dinner, every phone call, every family group chat, all of it orbited around that one event. I found out at some point that my mother had created a separate group chat with Daniel and Madison called Wedding Fam, complete with a champagne emoji. I was not in it. No one mentioned it. No one explained it. I just wasn't there. So when I drove myself to Providence Seattle Medical Center on a gray Tuesday morning in January, stomach empty, hands cold on the steering wheel, I did it alone. I checked in at the front desk, signed the forms, and was assigned to chair 11 in the infusion room. The nurse who accessed my port was a woman named Sandra, reading glasses on a beaded chain, steady hands, kind eyes. She glanced around the room, and then back at me. First time? Most people bring someone with them. I looked around. Chair 2 held a husband who hadn't let go of his wife's hand in the entire hour I'd been watching. He leaned in every so often and whispered something that made her smile, despite the IV in her arm. Chair 5 had a mother sitting beside her teenage son, reading out loud from a book, doing different voices for different characters, keeping his attention somewhere other than the needle. Chair 8 had an older father who had brought an insulated container of homemade soup, setting it gently on the tray beside his daughter, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Chair 11 had my handbag and my phone. That was it. Somewhere between hour 2 and hour 3, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my mother. "Mom, I started chemo today. I'm really scared." I stared at that sentence for a moment, before sending it. then put my phone face down on my knee and watched the IV drip. 5 hours later, by which point I was already home, lying curled on my kitchen floor because the nausea had arrived faster than I was prepared for, my phone buzzed. My mother had replied, "Hang in there, sweetie. Hey, quick question. For the wedding reception, do you think ivory tablecloths or champagne?" I lay there on the cold tile and read it twice. Then I typed back, "Ivory is nicer." I set the phone down, turned toward the cabinet under the sink, and was sick for the next 20 minutes. Then I took a screenshot of the conversation, opened the album on my phone, and saved it. By the fourth infusion session, I had a routine down. Park in the same spot, check in with the same clipboard, sit in chair 11, put my earbuds in, and wait. That was the morning Haley Carson pulled up a chair and sat down next to me without asking. She was the charge nurse for the oncology floor, curly red hair, the kind of direct eye contact that made lying feel pointless. "I've noticed you," she said simply. "You always come alone." I gave her the answer I'd been giving everyone. "My family's busy." She tilted her head slightly. "Busy with what?" I hesitated. "My brother's wedding." Haley was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then, "When's the wedding?" "October." "When does your treatment end?" I looked at her. "November." She nodded once, slowly, like she was filing something away. Then she said, in the same calm, even tone, "This hospital keeps visitor logs for every patient. Every visit, every date, who came. You can request a copy of your own records at any time." I didn't fully understand why she was telling me that. It felt random, almost out of place. But 3 days later, I went to the records office and requested my first copy. I didn't know yet what I was building. I only knew that when the people who are supposed to show up for you start rewriting the story, the only thing that can't be argued with is documentation. I kept building that folder, entry by entry, not because I had a plan, but because something in me understood that what was happening needed to be witnessed, even if only by me. It was September when my father called about the wedding. By that point, I was 4 cycles into chemotherapy, and my body was keeping score. I had lost nearly 18 pounds. My hair was coming out in slow, steady losses, on my pillow in the morning, in the shower drain, in my hands when I ran them through what was left. I was hollowing out in ways I couldn't fully hide anymore. My father's voice on the phone that afternoon was flat and deliberate, the tone he used when he had already made a decision and was simply notifying you of it. "Claire, about the October wedding, your mother and I think it would be best if you didn't attend." I went still. "Why? You haven't been looking well," he said. "The weight loss. Your hair." He paused, as if searching for the most diplomatic packaging for what he needed to say. "This is Daniel's special day. We don't want anything to pull focus." In the background, soft and careful, I heard my mother's voice. Not saying don't do this, not saying that's wrong, just, "Robert, keep your voice gentle." That was the part that stayed with me longest. Not my father's words. I expected those. But my mother heard the whole conversation, knew exactly what was being said to her daughter, and her contribution was to ask him to say it more softly. That was her version of protection, my father said. "That's the final word on it," and ended the call. I stood in my bathroom afterward and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked, for the first time in months. My collarbones pressed against my skin. The hair at my temples had thinned enough to see through. I understood exactly what my father was seeing, and the thing that broke me wasn't being told to stay away. It was that he wasn't entirely wrong. I did look like someone who was sick, and in my family, that had somehow become something to be ashamed of. October 15th came and went. I spent it in bed recovering from my 5th infusion, the chemical smell of treatment still sitting in my skin no matter how many times I showered. Somewhere around 9 in the evening, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. My mother had posted a full album, my father in a navy suit, beaming. My mother in a champagne gold dress, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Daniel and Madison at the center of it all, radiant, surrounded by 160 guests who had no idea the groom's sister existed. The caption read, "The most perfect day our family has ever had." 312 people had liked it. I screenshotted it, added it to the folder, closed the app, and didn't open it again for 7 months. Some things you only need to see once to understand completely. The medical bills started arriving in November, right after the wedding closed out. After my insurance had processed everything it would cover, the remaining balance came to $52,000. I sold my car, a 2019 Honda Civic I'd bought with 3 years of savings, canceled every subscription I had, and survived on instant noodles 3 meals a day for 6 weeks. I told myself it was manageable. I told myself I had a plan. Then one night around 11 o'clock I opened my banking app, looked at the actual number, and felt something crack open that the diagnosis itself never had. I had made a kind of peace with being sick, but sitting alone in my apartment in the dark, looking at that balance and knowing I had no one to call, that was a different kind of fear entirely. I typed out a message to my father, carefully, without any drama. Dad, I'm struggling with the medical bills. After insurance, it's $52,000. Is there any chance I could borrow part of it? I'll pay you back, I promise. I set the phone down and waited. 3 hours later, he replied. We just finished paying for Daniel's wedding. $85,000 is not a small number. There's nothing left over. Try your bank. Your credit should be good enough. There was no "how are you doing?" No, "I'm sorry you're going through this." Just a suggestion to find another solution, and then silence. I screenshotted the exchange, opened the folder, and the next morning I applied for a personal loan at 15.5% interest. Because what other choice did I have? The worst night came after my 6th infusion. It was November, close to 2 in the morning, and I was on the bathroom floor, shaking hard enough that my teeth were knocking together, one arm around the base of the toilet, unable to get up. I had woken to find my pillow covered in hair, more than before, great loose sections of it, and something about seeing that broke the last piece of composure I had been holding on to. I called my mother. She didn't answer. I called again, and again, 6 times between 2 and 3 in the morning, each one going straight to voicemail. At 3:22, I picked up my phone and typed a message to Haley. Haley, I think I need someone. She arrived at 4:05. She was still in her scrubs from a late shift, carrying a small bag, ginger tea, plain crackers, and a blanket. She didn't say anything. She sat down on the floor beside me, held back what was left of my hair, and stayed there until the sun came up and the shaking finally stopped. My mother called back at 10:47 the next morning. Oh, sweetheart, I had my phone on silent. Madison and I did facials yesterday. You know how it is after all the wedding stress. The body just needs to decompress. Did you need something? I looked across the kitchen at Haley, who was standing at my stove making tea, still in yesterday's clothes because she had never left. No, Mom, I said. Sorry, wrong number. After I hung up, I opened my phone, screenshotted the call log, 6 outgoing calls, 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., 0 answered, and added it to the folder without another thought. That night I learned the truest thing I know. Family is not the people who share your last name. Family is the person who sits down on a cold bathroom floor at 4 in the morning when you have absolutely nothing left to give, and stays anyway. I survived. That's the only way I know how to say it. I simply survived, one session at a time, one morning at a time, until one January afternoon, Dr. Caldwell looked up from her desk and said the words I had stopped letting myself imagine. No evidence of disease, Claire. You did it. I walked to my car, sat down in the driver's seat, and cried for 45 minutes straight. Not sad crying, not even happy crying exactly. It was the kind of release that has no name, the sound a person makes when they have been holding their breath for 7 months and finally, remember how to exhale. In the weeks that followed, my manager Marcus called to tell me my lead UX designer position was still mine if I wanted it. He had held it open for 8 months. Real talent doesn't have an expiration date, he said, and I had to put the phone down for a moment before I could respond. I moved into a new apartment in First Hill, bigger windows, a view of Puget Sound that turned gold in the evenings. I brought the fern with me. It was still alive, still green, which at that point felt like proof of something I couldn't fully articulate. I bought myself a simple silver ring, engraved with 2 words on the inside, "Still here." I wore it on my left hand every single day, not as decoration but as a reminder of everything I had gotten through, alone, without a single person from my family, sitting in chair 11 beside me. 2 years passed. I built a life that was genuinely mine. And then, on a Thursday evening while I was making dinner, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen on an incoming call in years. Dad. I stood there and watched it ring, for 4 full seconds before I picked up. His voice was different, thinner. There was a slight tremor at the end of each sentence that hadn't been there before. Claire, I need to see you. No. Hello. No, how have you been? No acknowledgement that the last real conversation we'd had ended with him hanging up on his daughter in a hospital hallway. I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, he said. Early stage, but the doctors say it will progress. A pause. There's a family dinner this Sunday at the house in Bellevue. I need you there. I said, I'll be there, and ended the call. Then I stood in my kitchen, looking at the pot of soup going cold on the stove, and I turned the silver ring slowly around my finger. In the entire length of that conversation, my father had not once asked whether I was still alive. I understood then that this was not going to be a family dinner. It was going to be a negotiation, and I intended to be prepared. Sunday came. I dressed carefully. Black slacks, a white silk blouse, the silver ring. Not to impress anyone. Armor has nothing to do with impressing people. Before I left, Haley sent me a text. You don't owe them a single thing. Not one. Remember that. I read it twice, and drove to Bellevue. The house looked exactly as I remembered. White colonial, 4 floors, a front lawn so perfectly maintained it barely looked real. I sat in my car for 7 minutes, watching the warm yellow light spill from the dining room windows, and I thought, I looked death in the face for 7 months. A family dinner cannot touch me. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. My mother answered and pulled me into a hug immediately, that familiar scent of Dior wrapping around me, the same perfume she had worn to every important Whitfield occasion I had been excluded from. Inside, the family photo wall stopped abruptly at a picture of me at 17, awkward and unsmiling at a school event. Everything after that was Daniel, his college graduation, his engagement party, his wedding. Madison was already seated at the table, 6 months pregnant, hands folded quietly in her lap. She watched me walk in with the careful, measured expression of someone who already knew how the evening was going to go. My father sat at the head of the table. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature, but in presence, and his left hand lay pressed flat against the white tablecloth, in a way that told me he was working to keep it still. After the plates were cleared, my father pushed himself slowly to his feet, one hand gripping the table edge. You all know about my diagnosis, he said, his voice reaching for its old authority and almost finding it. I'm going to need long-term care. And Claire, he looked directly at me, you are the obvious choice. You work remotely. You don't have a family of your own. Your old room has already been prepared. Daniel nodded from across the table. I've got a baby coming, and I can't step away from work. You understand how it is. I looked at my brother, then I looked at my father, then I smiled. Not warmly, not bitterly, just quietly, and placed both hands flat on the table. Before I answer, I said, I have one question. Dad, do you know what my most recent scan showed? Silence. Do you even know if I'm still alive? My father's face shifted. Something moved behind his eyes, the first flicker of uncertainty I had ever seen there. I had stage 3 lymphoma, I said. I went through 38 rounds of chemotherapy, over 7 months. I lost nearly 20 pounds. I lost my hair. I took out a $52,000 loan to pay for my own survival, after you told me you had no money to spare because you had just spent $85,000 on Daniel's wedding. I reached into my bag and set my phone on the mahogany table. I opened the folder I had been building for 2 years and turned the screen toward them. The tablecloth message, ivory or champagne. The text refusing the loan. The call log showing 6 unanswered calls between 2 and 3 in the morning. And then the last item, my official hospital visitor records. 38 sessions, 1 column. The word none, repeated down the entire page. My mother's hands trembled as she took the phone. Madison leaned forward from across the table, her expression changing line by line as she read. Daniel picked it up next, his face going a color I had never seen on him before. "Dad," he said quietly, "did you know about this?" My father opened his mouth. "The wedding. The timing was complicated." "You knew," Daniel said. Not a question. The room went completely silent, and in that silence, 2 years of documentation said everything I had never been able to say out loud. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing I have ever sat inside. And then my father began to cry. Not quietly, not with any of the composure he had spent 60 years perfecting. His shoulders shook. His left hand, the one he could no longer fully control, trembled against the tablecloth. "Claire," he said, his voice completely broken. "I'm sorry. I know I was wrong, but I'm scared. I need you. You're my daughter." And there it was, the sentence I had waited my entire childhood to matter enough to hear. For one brief, dangerous moment, I felt the 10-year-old version of myself stir somewhere deep inside my chest. The little girl who had spent decades trying to earn exactly this. I looked down at the silver ring on my finger. Still here. I stood up slowly, walked around the table, and stopped directly in front of him, close enough that there was no looking away, no softening of what I was about to say. "Dad," I said, my voice completely steady. 2 years ago, I called you in tears. I told you I had cancer. I told you I was terrified. Do you remember what you said to me?" He didn't answer. "You said, 'We can't deal with this right now.'" I let that sit in the air for a moment. Let every person at that table feel the weight of it. So here is my answer. I looked at him one last time, without anger, without bitterness, just with the clear, settled peace of someone who has already done the hardest part. "I can't deal with this right now." My mother gasped. Daniel's jaw dropped. Madison looked down at the table. I turned, and I walked. My heels struck the hardwood floor in a steady, unhurried rhythm, past the photo wall that ended at my 17-year-old face, past the crystal chandelier, toward the front door. My mother followed, her voice rising behind me. "Claire, please. We are your family. We love you." I stopped at the door and turned back one final time. "Mom," I said gently, "family doesn't leave you alone to fight for your life, and love is not something you get to save for the moments when you need something in return." Then I walked out into the night air, got in my car, and drove away without once looking in the rearview mirror. A week later, my mother called to let me know that Daniel had taken a leave of absence from his firm to help care for my father, and that the promotion he had been expecting was now uncertain. For the first time in his life, the golden son was being asked to set something down. Madison sent me a private message not long after, and it was unlike anything I had received from anyone in that family. "I didn't know," she wrote. "Daniel never told me the full story. I'm sorry I didn't ask." No request attached, no favor buried at the end, just an apology, offered freely, from someone who had sat quietly at that table and finally understood what she had witnessed. 3 weeks after the dinner, my mother sent a text that stopped me mid-sentence when I read it. "I owe you a real apology, not an explanation, not an excuse. I failed to protect you when you needed me most, and I have to live with that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know that I see it now. I see what we did. I'm sorry. I read it 3 times. I waited 2 days." Then I wrote back, "Thank you for saying that. I'm not ready yet, but I heard you." She replied 4 words. "Whenever you're ready. Always." I showed the exchange to Haley over dinner that Friday. 4 words, I told her. Completely different 4 words. She smiled and squeezed my hand across the table. 2 weeks after the dinner, an envelope arrived in the mail, handwritten, the letters careful and uneven, in a way that told me exactly what the tremor in his hands had cost him to produce. Haley was with me when it arrived. "Just read it," she said. "Waiting is always worse than whatever's inside." I opened it alone that Thursday evening, a glass of red wine on the table, the fern on the windowsill catching the last of the light. My father wrote that he had made a choice, not a mistake, a choice, to prioritize a celebration over his daughter's survival, and that he understood the difference. He did not ask me to come back. He did not ask for anything at all. He only asked whether he was still allowed to call himself my father. "You are stronger than I ever was," he wrote. "I didn't lose you because of Parkinson's. I lost you because I wasn't the parent you deserved. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand. I didn't throw it away. I didn't write back. That was its own kind of answer. Not forever. Just not yet. 6 months later, I was promoted to creative lead. My office had a window that faced Puget Sound, and I brought the fern to sit on the sill beside me. It had been alive for 6 years by then. I was seeing someone, a high school English teacher named Nathan, who had kind eyes and a habit of telling jokes that only I ever laughed at. He knew everything: the diagnosis, the folder, the dinner, all of it. And he showed up anyway, consistently, without being asked, simply because he wanted to be there. Haley was still my Friday evening. She had started dating a surgeon named Elena, and the four of us had built something that felt more like family than anything I had grown up inside. The family album is still on my phone. I don't open it often, but I haven't deleted it either, because it is the record of something that actually happened, and I will not pretend otherwise. I am Claire Whitfield. I am 31 years old. I am still here, and the thing I spent too long learning is this: you cannot fill a cup with a hole in the bottom by emptying yourself into it. You are allowed to set it down. You are allowed to walk away, and sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is exactly that: walk away, and not look back,